The transport ship Kaleidoscope hummed through the void between stars, its massive bulk cutting through space toward the Zerion system. In the cargo bay, Commander Vextai clicked her 4 arms impatiently as she reviewed the mission roster one final time. The Galactic Council had assigned her team to investigate the disappearance of 3 research vessels in the Outer Rim. Simple enough work for an experienced crew. Her compound eyes scanned the familiar names of her squad. Korak, the massive Thurian warrior whose chitinous armor could deflect plasma bolts. Zelitha, the graceful selenite whose photosynthetic skin could sustain her for months without food. Nexus 7, the synthetic being whose computational matrix could process 1,000,000 calculations per second. All proven, reliable, effective. Then her gaze fell on the final entry, and her mandibles clicked in annoyance. Marcus Webb, human, tracker specialist. The Council's decision to include a human on this mission still baffled her. Humans were new to galactic society, barely having achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. They were soft, weak creatures who required constant sustenance and couldn't survive in most planetary environments without protective suits. Their lifespans were laughably short, and their technology was primitive compared to the other Council species. The cargo bay doors hissed open, and the subject of her irritation walked in. Marcus Webb was exactly what she expected, unremarkable in every way. Average height for a human, perhaps 6 feet tall, with brown hair and unremarkable features. He wore standard council fatigues that hung loosely on his lean frame. In one hand, he carried a small duffel bag that likely contained everything he owned. "Commander Vextai?" His voice was quiet, respectful. "Tracker Webb reporting for duty." Vextai's secondary arms crossed while her primary arms gestured dismissively. "You're late. The council briefing ran over. I apologize." Korak's massive form shifted in the corner, his voice rumbling like grinding stone. "This is our tracker? He looks like he'd snap in the first strong wind." Zelitha's melodic voice chimed in, her green skin shimmering with amusement. "Perhaps the council sent him as emergency rations. I've heard humans are quite nutritious." Even Nexus 7's optical sensors focused on Marcus with what could only be described as mechanical skepticism. Preliminary analysis suggests this organism's survival probability in hostile environments is approximately 12.7%. This seems inefficient. Marcus said nothing. He simply found an empty equipment locker and stowed his gear, his movements precise and economical. Vextai noticed he didn't react to their mockery, didn't try to defend himself or prove his worth with boastful claims. Interesting, but not necessarily impressive. "Listen, human," Vextai said, moving closer until her towering 8-foot frame loomed over him. "I don't know what strings the council pulled to get you on this mission, but understand this. You're here as an observer. When we reach the Zerion system, you'll stay on the ship while the real professionals handle the investigation. Clear?" Marcus met her compound gaze steadily. "Crystal clear, Commander. You're in charge." Something in his tone made her pause. There was no fear, no resentment, just calm acceptance. Most species would have been intimidated by her presence, but this human seemed utterly unfazed. "Good. Nexus, show him to his quarters. We'll reach Zerion in 6 days. As they prepared to leave, Vextai overheard Korak speaking to Zelitha in low tones. "I give him 2 days before he cracks. Humans aren't built for long space voyages. Their weak minds can't handle the isolation." "I think less than that," Zelitha replied. "Did you see how pale he went when we mentioned the missing ships? He's probably already planning to request a transfer back to Earth." But Marcus had heard everything. As he followed Nexus 7 through the ship's corridors, his expression remained neutral, almost serene. The synthetic being's optical array swiveled to examine him periodically, running constant scans and analysis. "Your biometric readings are unusual," Nexus 7 commented as they stopped at a small cabin door. Heart rate steady, stress hormones minimal, brain activity patterns indicating high focus rather than anxiety. Most organics display significant physiological responses to social rejection. Maybe I'm used to it, Marcus replied simply. Interesting. May I inquire about your previous experience? Council records indicate you've served as a tracker on several missions, but the details are classified above my clearance level. Marcus hefted his duffel bag and stepped into the cramped quarters. Nothing exciting, just basic search and rescue work. Nexus 7's sensors detected the subtle evasion. But the human had already closed the door. The synthetic being filed this information away for further analysis. Something about this Marcus Webb didn't match the typical human profile in their databases. Over the next few days, the crew's opinion of their human passenger remained unchanged. Marcus ate his meals alone, spent hours in the ship's small observation deck staring out at the stars, and participated minimally in crew briefings. He asked few questions and volunteered no opinions about their mission strategy. Vextai found his behavior mildly annoying. Most species tried to prove themselves when faced with skepticism. They would demonstrate their skills, share stories of past achievements, or at least argue their case. Marcus did none of this. He simply existed quietly on the periphery of her crew. On the fourth day, Zelitha cornered him in the ship's small galley during the night cycle. "You know, human, you don't have to sulk," she said, her bioluminescent spots pulsing with gentle light. "We're not trying to be cruel. It's just that tracking dangerous missing vessels requires experience and capabilities that your species simply lacks." Marcus looked up from the nutrition paste he'd been eating methodically. "I'm not sulking." "Then what are you doing? You've barely spoken to anyone since we launched." "Observing, learning about the crew dynamics, understanding how each of you thinks and reacts." Zelitha's spots flickered with confusion. "Why would you need to know that?" "Because when we reach Zerion and things go wrong, those dynamics might be important." "When things go wrong?" She laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "You're quite pessimistic. We're one of the Council's elite investigation teams." 3 ships disappeared in that system, Marcus said quietly. Ships with their own elite crews. Whatever took them is still out there. Before Zelitha could respond, he'd finished his meal and left the galley. She remained behind, suddenly less certain about the mission than she'd been moments before. The next morning, Korak found Marcus in the ship's small gym, performing what appeared to be some sort of human combat training. The movements were fluid, precise, almost hypnotic to watch. Each motion flowed seamlessly into the next, as if the human was fighting invisible opponents in a deadly dance. "Your species' fighting styles are amusing," Korak rumbled, his massive form filling the doorway. "All flash and theatrics. In real combat, technique means nothing if you lack the strength to back it up." Marcus continued his routine without missing a beat. "You're probably right." The Thurian warrior had expected argument, perhaps a demonstration of human stubbornness. This calm agreement caught him off guard. "I've fought humans before," Korak continued, trying to provoke a reaction. "During the border skirmishes 20 years ago. Fragile creatures. They break easily." "Most things break if you hit them hard enough," Marcus replied, flowing through a complex series of movements that somehow reminded Korak of predators he'd seen stalking prey on his homeworld. "You don't fight like the other humans I've encountered." "I'm not like other humans." Something in the way Marcus said it sent an unexpected chill down Korak's armored spine. The human's movement suddenly seemed less like exercise and more like preparation. But preparation for what? As they entered the Zerion system on the 6th day, Vextai assembled her crew in the briefing room. The holographic display showed the positions of the 3 missing vessels' last known coordinates, scattered across the system like a trail of breadcrumbs. "The first ship, Endeavor, disappeared 3 months ago near the 4th planet," she explained. her mandibles clicking as she processed the data. The second, Stellar Wind, vanished 6 weeks later near the asteroid belt. The third, Deep Probe, went missing just 2 weeks ago at the edge of the system. Progressive hunting pattern, Marcus said quietly from his position in the back. The room fell silent. It was the first time he'd voluntarily contributed to a briefing. "Explain," Vextai commanded. "The disappearances aren't random. Someone or something is systematically eliminating ships that enter this system. They started with the outer rim, then moved inward, testing defenses and capabilities with each encounter." Nexus 7's optical array whirred as it processed this assessment. Analysis confirms the pattern. However, this suggests intelligence behind the disappearances rather than natural phenomena or pirates. "What kind of intelligence hunts ships like this?" Zelitha asked, her spots pulsing with nervous energy. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. "The kind that learns, adapts, gets stronger with each kill." Vextai felt her chitin ripple with unease. The human's assessment aligned with her own growing suspicions. But hearing it spoken aloud made the threat seem more real. "We'll proceed carefully," she decided. "Full sensor sweeps, maintain communication with Council headquarters at all times. Any sign of trouble and we retreat immediately." As the crew dispersed to their stations, Marcus lingered behind. When Vextai noticed he hadn't left, she turned to face him. "Something else, human?" "Commander, when we encounter whatever did this, I'd like permission to leave the ship." Vextai's compound eyes narrowed. "Absolutely not. You're here as an observer only." "With respect, ma'am, observation only goes so far. Sometimes you need to get closer to understand what you're hunting." "Hunting?" She clicked her mandibles in what might have been amusement. "You think you're a hunter, human? You're prey. Stay on the ship where you might actually survive this mission." Marcus nodded slowly, but Vextai caught something in his expression that she couldn't quite identify. It looked almost like pity. The kaleidoscope drifted through the debris field that had once been the research vessel Endeavor. Twisted metal fragments spun slowly in the void, their surfaces scorched and torn in ways that defied easy explanation. The destruction was unlike anything Vextai had seen in her 30 years of military service. "Nexus, analysis," she commanded, though her voice carried less authority than usual. The synthetic being's sensors swept over the wreckage. "Preliminary scans indicate directed energy weapons, but the signature is unrecognizable. The damage patterns suggest the attack came from multiple angles simultaneously." "Pack hunters," Marcus observed from his position at a secondary console. He'd been given limited sensor access, despite Vextai's earlier restrictions, mainly to keep him busy and out of the way. Korak's armored plates scraped against each other as he shifted uncomfortably. "Pack hunters that can coordinate attacks in three-dimensional space? That level of tactical sophistication suggests military training." "Or something that evolved to hunt in 3 dimensions," Marcus replied. "On Earth, there are predators that coordinate pack attacks both above and below their prey. Wolves on the surface, sharks in the depths." Zelitha's photosynthetic skin had taken on a distinctly pale green tinge. "You're suggesting these creatures hunt ships the way predators hunt prey animals?" "I'm suggesting we're looking at this wrong," Marcus said, his fingers dancing across the console as he analyzed the debris patterns. "Everyone assumes space pirates or hostile aliens. But what if we're dealing with something that sees ships not as vessels containing intelligent life, but simply as large, slow-moving prey?" Vextai was about to dismiss this theory when the ship's proximity alarms began shrieking. Red lights bathed the bridge as Nexus 7's voice cut through the chaos. "Multiple contacts approaching from the asteroid field. Speed and trajectory inconsistent with standard spacecraft." The main viewer shifted to show their pursuers, and Vextai's ichor ran cold. The creatures approaching them defied easy categorization. They were roughly ship-sized, but clearly organic, with elongated bodies covered in what appeared to be natural armor plating. Membrane-like wings spread behind them, somehow providing propulsion in the vacuum of space. Most disturbing were the clusters of sensory organs along their elongated heads, glowing with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in obvious communication. "Space-adapted predators," Marcus said with something approaching admiration in his voice. "They've evolved to hunt in the void between worlds." "Evolution doesn't work that fast," Zelitha protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "It does if it's been going on for millions of years," Marcus replied. "This system might be their natural hunting ground." The 3 missing ships weren't the first victims, they were just the first ones anyone noticed. There were 7 of the creatures closing in on them, moving with a fluid coordination that spoke of countless hunts together. Vextai's tactical training kicked in as she began issuing orders. "Korak, weapons online. Zelitha, damage control teams to stations. Nexus, find us an escape route." "Commander," Nexus 7 reported, "their approach pattern is consistent with pack hunting behavior. They're positioning themselves to cut off potential escape vectors." The first creature reached weapons range and opened fire, but instead of energy beams or projectiles, it expelled a cloud of what appeared to be organic material that spread rapidly across space. When the cloud contacted the kaleidoscope shields, the energy field began fluctuating wildly. "Some kind of bioelectric interference," Korak reported from the weapons station. "It's disrupting our defensive systems." A second creature added its own discharge to the cloud, and the shield generators began overloading. Sparks flew from control panels as the ship's systems struggled to compensate. "They're not trying to destroy us immediately," Marcus observed, studying the attack pattern. "They're disabling our defenses first, like a spider wrapping up prey before the killing bite." "Wonderful observation, human," Vextai snapped as she fought to keep the ship stable. "Do you have any useful suggestions?" "Yes, actually." Marcus stood from his console, moving toward the exit. "Let me off the ship." "Are you insane?" "Commander, their hunting behavior is focused on the ship as a single large target. If I create a separate threat vector, something smaller and more aggressive, it might disrupt their coordination." Korak's laugh sounded like grinding metal. "You think you can fight 7 space-adapted predators in a small shuttle? You'll be dead before you clear the launch bay." "Maybe," Marcus admitted. "But right now, we're all dead if we stay on the current course. At least this gives the rest of you a chance to escape." Before Vextai could refuse, the ship lurched violently as the creatures began their final approach. 2 of them attached themselves to the hull with organic grapples, while the others circled like aerial predators, waiting for their moment to strike. "Hull breach in Section 7, Nexus 7 reported. They're burning through the armor plating with some form of acid secretion." The sound of metal dissolving came clearly through the ship's internal communication system. It wouldn't be long before they were inside. "The shuttle bay," Vextai decided suddenly. "But you take a full weapons loadout and stay in constant communication. The moment things go wrong, you return to the ship immediately." "Understood, Commander." As Marcus headed for the shuttle bay, Zelitha caught his arm. Her spots pulsed with concern, and for the first time since he'd joined them, she seemed to see him as something more than an unwanted burden. "Human, Marcus, be careful out there. These creatures, they're not like anything we've encountered before." Marcus looked down at her delicate, plant-like fingers wrapped around his arm, then met her gaze with eyes that suddenly seemed much older than his apparent age. "Neither am I," he said quietly. The shuttle Minnow was the smallest craft on the ship, barely large enough for one person, and designed primarily for reconnaissance work. As Marcus strapped himself into the pilot's seat, he ran through mental calculations about payload, maneuverability, and the hunting instincts of pack predators. "Minnow to kaleidoscope," he said into the comm as the shuttle bay doors cycled open. "Launching in 10 seconds. Copy, Minnow. Try not to get yourself eaten immediately." The shuttle shot from the bay like a missile, its small size allowing for acceleration that would have pulped most organic beings. But Marcus rode the crushing G-forces without apparent distress, his focus entirely on the creatures surrounding the main ship. As he'd predicted, his sudden appearance disrupted their coordination. 3 of the creatures immediately broke off from their assault on the kaleidoscope to pursue this new, smaller target. Their hunting instincts had identified him as either a fleeing prey animal or a potential threat that needed elimination. "That's right," Marcus murmured as he led the creatures away from the main ship. "Follow the small, weak human. Easy target." The pursuing creatures were fast, but the shuttle was faster in straight-line acceleration. Marcus led them on a winding chase through the asteroid field, using the rocky debris as cover while he studied their movement patterns and capabilities. They were intelligent, no doubt about that. When he used an asteroid to break line of sight, they split up to cover multiple approach vectors. When he feinted toward what appeared to be an escape route, they anticipated his move and closed the trap before he could exploit it. But intelligence and instinct weren't the same thing. After 10 minutes of chase, Marcus began to understand how these creatures thought, how they processed threats and opportunities. More importantly, he began to recognize something familiar in their hunting behavior. "Minnow to kaleidoscope," he called over the comm. "I'm going to try something. If this works, be ready to move fast when I give the signal." "What are you planning?" Vextai's voice crackled with interference from the creature's bioelectric fields. "Something I learned a long time ago. On Earth." Marcus cut the shuttle's engines and let momentum carry him toward a cluster of larger asteroids. To the pursuing creatures, it would look like mechanical failure or a desperate attempt to hide. They converged on his position with obvious satisfaction, closing in for what they assumed would be an easy kill. At the last possible moment, Marcus restarted the engines and dove toward the largest asteroid, the shuttle's wake turbulence creating a debris cloud behind him. The pursuing creatures, committed to their attack run, flew directly into the cloud at full speed. The first creature struck a chunk of rock and tumbled, wounded but not dead. The second managed to avoid the larger debris but took several smaller impacts that damaged its wing membranes. The third pulled up at the last second, but its evasive maneuver left it separated from its packmates and vulnerable. Marcus brought the shuttle around in a tight turn that would have been impossible for the larger creatures to match. As he lined up on the isolated predator, his hands moved to weapons controls with practiced precision. The shuttle's plasma cannons weren't designed for combat, but in the right hands, any weapon could be deadly. Marcus fired a sustained burst at the creature's wing membrane, not trying to kill it outright, but to wound it enough to change its behavior. The creature's bioluminescent patterns shifted from hunting coordination to distress calls. Its pack mates immediately responded, abandoning their pursuit to protect their wounded member. "Now," Marcus said quietly, "show me what you really are." What he saw in the next few minutes changed everything he thought he knew about these creatures. The pack didn't simply defend their wounded member, they actively worked together to treat its injuries. 2 creatures positioned themselves to shield the wounded one, while a third began secreting some kind of healing compound onto the damaged wing membrane. It was sophisticated medical behavior, far beyond simple pack instincts. These weren't just predators, they were intelligent beings with complex social structures and emotional bonds. "Minnow to kaleidoscope," Marcus said, his voice heavy with new understanding. "Stand down weapons. Do not fire on the creatures." "Have you lost your mind?" Vextai's voice crackled with disbelief. "They were trying to eat us." "No, Commander. They were trying to protect their territory. There's a difference." Marcus slowly maneuvered the shuttle back toward the main ship, careful to keep his movements non-threatening. The creatures watched him go, but didn't pursue. Their body language suggested wariness rather than hunger. "They're not mindless predators," he explained as he docked with the kaleidoscope. "They're intelligent social beings who see ships as invaders in their home system. The missing vessels weren't hunted for food, they were eliminated as threats." As Marcus made his way back to the bridge, he found the crew staring at him with expressions ranging from confusion to something approaching respect. Even Korak seemed to be reassessing his initial opinion of the small human. "How did you know?" Zelitha asked. "How did you understand their behavior so quickly?" Marcus paused at the bridge entrance, his expression unreadable. "Because I've been hunted before," he said simply. "And I've done my share of hunting, too." The revelation that the space-dwelling creatures were intelligent changed everything about the mission. Vextai found herself in the unusual position of conducting first contact protocols with beings that had already demonstrated their capability to destroy spacecraft. The fact that her human tracker had somehow convinced them to stand down their attack left her with more questions than answers. "Explain to me again how you knew they would respond to a wounded pack member," she demanded as the crew gathered in the briefing room. The creatures, 7 of them, maintained a loose formation around the kaleidoscope, neither threatening nor retreating. Marcus stood at the holographic display, manipulating the image to show the creatures' formation patterns during their encounter. His movements were precise, economical, and Vextai noticed that his earlier deference had been replaced by quiet confidence. "Pack behavior follows predictable patterns across species," he explained. "When I wounded one of them, I was essentially sending a message. I could hurt them, but I chose to show restraint. In pack dynamics, that's often interpreted as a dominance display rather than an act of aggression." Nexus 7's optical array focused intently on Marcus. "Your knowledge of interspecies behavioral psychology is remarkably advanced for someone with your listed qualifications." "I told you I wasn't like other humans." Korak's massive frame shifted uneasily. "You spoke of being hunted, and hunting others. Elaborate." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying the display showing the creatures' current positions. When he spoke, his voice carried undertones that made even the veteran crew members uncomfortable. "Humans aren't the peaceful explorers the Council thinks we are," he said finally. "We're predators who learn to cooperate. For most of our species' history, we've been both hunter and hunted, depending on the circumstances." "The Council files indicate humans evolved as omnivores with some predatory adaptations," Zelitha protested. "Nothing exceptional about that." "The Council files don't tell the whole story." Marcus turned to face them directly, and something in his posture had changed. The quiet, unassuming passenger was gone, replaced by something that radiated barely contained lethality. "Humans are persistence hunters. We don't have claws or fangs or natural armor. What we have is the ability to track prey across vast distances, to analyze behavior patterns, and to never give up once we've identified a target." Vextai felt her chitin ripple with sudden unease. "Are you saying humans are natural trackers?" "I'm saying humans are natural killers who've learned to use tools instead of teeth." Marcus gestured toward the creatures outside. "Those beings out there? They've evolved to hunt in 3-dimensional space. They're perfectly adapted predators in their environment. But they're not the apex predators they think they are." "You're talking about hunting intelligent beings," Nexus 7 observed, its voice modulated to suggest concern. "I'm talking about survival," Marcus corrected. "When those 3 ships disappeared, what do you think happened to their crews?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Vextai realized she'd been so focused on the missing vessels that she hadn't considered the fate of the beings aboard them. "The crews are still alive," Marcus continued. "Somewhere in this system, probably being held as specimens or entertainment." "How could you possibly know that?" Zelitha asked, her spots pulsing with nervous energy. Because if you're an intelligent predator species that's just encountered new prey with advanced technology, you don't just kill them. You study them. You learn their capabilities. You figure out how to use their tools against other members of their species. The implications of this statement settled over the crew like a cold weight. If Marcus was right, then the missing crews were still alive, but in a situation far worse than simple death. We need to establish communication with these creatures, Vextai decided. Find out what happened to our people. Already working on it, Marcus replied, moving to a communication console. Nexus, can you help me set up a mathematical sequence broadcast? Something that demonstrates intelligence without appearing threatening? As the synthetic being assisted with the technical setup, Vextai found herself studying Marcus with new attention. His knowledge of predator behavior, his calm assessment of their tactical situation, his immediate understanding of the creature's social dynamics, none of it matched the profile of a simple tracker. "Human," she said quietly, moving to stand beside him. "What exactly did you do before joining the council?" Marcus's hands paused over the controls for just a moment. "Various things. Security work. Mostly. Security work doesn't teach someone to analyze alien psychology or pilot combat shuttles under fire." "No," Marcus agreed. "It doesn't." The communication array activated, broadcasting a simple mathematical progression into space. Within minutes, the creatures responded with their own sequence, one that demonstrated not only intelligence, but sophisticated mathematical understanding. "They're definitely sentient," Nexus 7 confirmed. "Intelligence level comparable to Council standard." The response pattern shifted, becoming more complex. Then, unexpectedly, it included what appeared to be spatial coordinates within the system. "They want us to follow them," Marcus interpreted. "To a specific location." "Could be a trap," Korak growled. "Could be," Marcus agreed. "But it's also our only lead to the missing crews." Vextai studied the coordinates. They pointed toward a massive asteroid in the belt, one large enough to have its own weak gravitational field and possibly a contained atmosphere. "We'll investigate," she decided. "But carefully. Nexus, full defensive systems online. Korak, weapons ready but not targeted. We don't want to appear aggressive." As the kaleidoscope followed the creatures toward the asteroid, Marcus remained at the communication station, monitoring their escort's behavior. The creatures maintained a precise formation that allowed them to react quickly to any threat while still appearing non-hostile. "They're being just as careful as we are," he observed. "Professional soldiers would behave the same way." "You think they have military organization?" Vextai asked. "I think they have something we haven't considered. A civilization. These creatures aren't just evolved predators operating on instinct. They have technology, social structures, probably art and philosophy, too." The asteroid grew larger on the main viewer, and it quickly became apparent that Marcus was right. The surface was covered with structures that were clearly artificial, organic in design but undeniably the product of intelligent construction. "It's a city," Zalitha breathed. "They've built a city inside the asteroid belt." "Multiple cities," Nexus 7 corrected as its sensors picked up similar structures on nearby asteroids. "This appears to be an entire civilization that's developed in parallel with spacefaring technology." As they approached the primary asteroid, a docking port extended from its surface, clearly designed to accommodate vessels like theirs. The creature's formation shifted to guide them toward the berth with practiced efficiency. "They've done this before," Marcus noted, "probably with the missing ships." The docking procedure went smoothly, though Vextai kept the crew on full alert. As the kaleidoscope settled into the berth, she found herself facing the most challenging first contact situation of her career. "How do we handle this?" she asked Marcus, surprising herself by seeking his advice. Carefully, he replied. We're dealing with a predator species that's intelligent, organized, and considers this system their territory. They could have destroyed us, but they chose not to. That suggests they want something from us. What could they want from the Council? Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying the alien architecture visible through the viewport. When he answered, his voice carried a note of professional assessment that sent chills down Vextai's spine. Recognition, territory rights, probably a guarantee that the Council will stop sending ships into their system without permission. And if the Council refuses, then they'll demonstrate their capabilities more dramatically, starting with us. As if summoned by his words, the ship's external sensors detected movement in the docking bay. 3 of the creatures had taken positions around the kaleidoscope, while several smaller beings, possibly juveniles or a different caste, approached the airlock. Welcoming committee, Korak observed grimly. Or guard detail, Marcus corrected. We're guests here, but we're also potential prisoners. The distinction might not matter much if things go wrong. The airlock chimed, indicating an external connection. Vextai looked around at her crew, seeing her own uncertainty reflected in their expressions. Only Marcus seemed calm, almost anticipatory. We go in armed but not threatening, she decided. Marcus, you take point. Your assessment of their behavior has been accurate so far. With respect, Commander, I should probably stay back for this initial contact. Why? Marcus met her gaze, and for a moment, she saw something dangerous looking back at her. Because if this goes wrong, you're going to need someone who thinks like they do to get you out alive. And that's not something you want them to see coming. As the airlock cycled open to reveal their alien hosts, Vextai began to understand that her quiet human tracker was far more complex than she'd realized. The question was whether that complexity would save them or doom them all. The beings waiting in the docking bay were even more impressive up close. Standing nearly 10 feet tall, their elongated forms moved with fluid grace, despite their size. Their bioluminescent patterns pulsed in complex sequences that clearly conveyed meaning, and their multiple sensory organs tracked every movement with predatory focus. But what struck Vextai most was their obvious intelligence. They wore what appeared to be ceremonial garments, carried tools that were clearly technological rather than purely biological, and maintained formations that spoke of sophisticated social organization. The lead being approached slowly, its patterns shifting to what Marcus interpreted as greeting or acknowledgement. When it spoke, the words came through a translation device that converted the creature's bioelectric communications into Council standard. We are the Kethvar. You are trespassers in our domain, but you have shown wisdom in your approach. We would speak with your leaders. I am Commander Vextai of the Galactic Council vessel Kaleidoscope, she replied formally. We come seeking information about missing ships in this system. The creature's patterns shifted. Consultation with its companions, Marcus guessed. The vessels you seek are safe. Their crews are guests, as you are now guests. Come. Our elder wishes to meet those who sent the hunter-killer. Vextai's mandibles clicked in confusion. Hunter-killer? The Kethavar's sensory organs focused on Marcus with unmistakable intensity. The small one who wounded our scout and chose mercy over killing. We know what he is, even if you do not. The interior of the Kethvar city was unlike anything the crew had ever seen. Organic architecture flowed seamlessly into technological installations, creating spaces that felt both alien and strangely welcoming. Bioluminescent panels provided soft lighting, while living walls processed atmosphere and maintained temperature. It was clear that the Kethvar had achieved a level of biotechnological integration that surpassed even the most advanced Council species. As they walked through corridors filled with curious Kethvar citizens, Vextai noticed how the aliens' attention focused primarily on Marcus. Their bioluminescent patterns shifted whenever they saw him, and several times their guide had to gesture for crowd control. It was clear that word of the humans' actions during their encounter had spread throughout the city. "They're studying you," Zelitha observed quietly. "Like you're some kind of specimen." "More than that," Marcus replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're trying to categorize me, figure out what kind of predator I am." "And what conclusions are they reaching?" Nexus 7 asked, its sensors picking up the subtle changes in the aliens' behavioral patterns. "That I'm dangerous, but controllable, for now." Their destination was a vast chamber at the city's heart, its walls lined with what appeared to be trophies or memorials. As they entered, Vextai realized with growing horror that many of the displays contained artifacts from the missing ships, pieces of hull plating, personal items, even fragments of council uniforms were arranged in careful presentations. At the chamber's center sat the largest Kethvar any of them had seen, its bioluminescent patterns so complex and rapidly shifting that the translation system struggled to keep up. When it spoke, the words carried the weight of considerable age and authority. "I am Vessel Keeper Thassalon, elder of this hunting ground. You have come seeking your lost packmates, and we welcome this, what is your word, diplomacy. We've come to investigate the disappearance of 3 council vessels," Vextai replied formally. "We hope to recover our people and establish peaceful relations between our governments." The elder's patterns shifted to what might have been amusement. "Governments, you think in terms of territory and abstract power. We think in terms of hunting grounds and family bonds. Your government has been sending ships into our space for months, ignoring all warnings." "What warnings?" Korak demanded. "No distress signals were received from any of the missing vessels." "Because they had no time to send them," another Kethvar interjected, its patterns indicating aggressive satisfaction. "We are efficient hunters." The elder's patterns flashed in what was clearly a rebuke, and the younger Kethvar subsided immediately. "Hierarchical social structure," Marcus noted. "Chain of command enforced through biological imperatives." "Your people are alive," Thassalon continued, addressing Vextai. "But they are, how do you say, prisoners of war. We do not recognize your government's claim to this space." "The Zerion system isn't claimed by any council member," Vextai protested. "It's classified as neutral space, open to scientific exploration." "Neutral to you. Home to us." The elder's patterns shifted to something that registered as cold anger on the translation system. "For thousands of years, the Kethvar have hunted these spaces. Then you outsiders arrive with your loud ships and crude technology, disturbing migration patterns and claiming territory that isn't yours to claim." Nexus 7's optical array focused intently on the elder. "Are you saying the Council's exploration activities have disrupted your ecosystem?" "Ecosystem. Hunting grounds. Feeding territories. Your words differ, but the meaning is the same. Your ships poison our space with their crude fusion drives and electromagnetic pollution. Prey species flee. Young hunters starve." Vextai felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The Kethvar weren't simply hostile aliens. They were a threatened species defending their territory from what they perceived as invasion. "If we'd known the system was inhabited, we would have followed proper first contact protocols," she said carefully. "Would you?" The elder's patterns conveyed skeptical amusement. "The first ship we encountered attempted to flee immediately upon detecting our presence. The second opened fire when we approached for communication. The third tried to call reinforcements before we could disable their systems." "Standard defensive protocols," Korak muttered. "Any military vessel would respond the same way to unknown contacts." "Yes," Thassalon agreed. "Military responses. Your people think in terms of conquest and domination just as we do. This is why understanding was impossible." Until now, Marcus said quietly, speaking for the first time since they'd entered the chamber. The elder's attention focused on him with laser-like intensity. Yes, until the hunter-killer arrived. I'm not a killer, Marcus replied calmly, but you are a hunter. The elder's patterns shifted to complex sequences that the translation system couldn't interpret. You understood our behavior patterns within minutes of contact. You analyzed our pack dynamics and exploited them to establish dominance. You chose to wound rather than kill, demonstrating both capability and restraint. This is sophisticated hunting behavior. It's basic psychology. For your species, perhaps. Tell me, hunter-killer, how many of your own kind have you tracked? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Vextai saw something flicker across Marcus's expression, a moment of carefully controlled emotion that suggested the elder had hit close to home. Enough to understand how predators think, Marcus answered finally. Yes, we know your kind now. We have studied your ship databases, learned of your species' history. Humans are apex predators who learn to cooperate instead of competing. This makes you unusual. The elder gestured toward one of the wall displays, and a holographic projection appeared showing what looked like tactical assessments and behavioral analyses. Vextai realized with growing alarm that the Kethvar had been studying humanity far more thoroughly than the Council had ever studied them. Most species achieve intelligence by suppressing their predatory instincts, Thasalen continued. Humans achieved intelligence by refining them. You have turned hunting into an art form, tracking, analyzing, anticipating prey behavior across vast territories and timescales. That's an oversimplification, Zelitha protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Is it? Your species' military history spans millennia of increasingly sophisticated warfare. Your entertainment media celebrates tracking and killing. Your greatest heroes are often those who hunt other intelligent beings. The elder's attention returned to Marcus. And you, hunter-killer, what do you hunt? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying the displays around them. When he spoke, his voice carried undertones that made even Vextai step back instinctively. Things that need to be stopped. Ah. The elder's patterns pulsed with what might have been satisfaction. A hunter with purpose. We understand this. It is why we chose to speak with you rather than simply eliminate your ship as we did the others. The other crews, Vextai interrupted, trying to regain control of the conversation. Are they unharmed? They are alive, fed, housed appropriately for their species' needs. But they are prisoners until this territorial dispute is resolved. What would it take to resolve it? The elder's patterns shifted to consultation mode as it communicated with several other Kethvar in bioelectric sequences too rapid for translation. When the conference ended, Thasalen addressed them again. Your Galactic Council must acknowledge Kethvar's sovereignty over this system. In return, we will establish formal diplomatic relations and allow limited scientific access to non-critical areas. That's actually quite reasonable, Vextai admitted. But your government will refuse, the elder continued. We have studied Council history. You do not negotiate with species you perceive as threats. You either assimilate them into your political structure or eliminate them as obstacles to expansion. The accuracy of this assessment was uncomfortably close to reality. The Galactic Council's track record with genuinely independent species was not encouraging. There might be another option, Marcus said quietly. Both Vextai and the Elder focused on him with intense interest. Explain, Thasalen commanded. The Council needs to understand that the Kethvar aren't just another species to be cataloged and managed. You're apex predators with technology and intelligence equal to any Council member. But more importantly, you're already demonstrating something the Council values above everything else. Which is? Restraint. You could have destroyed every ship that entered your system, but you chose to capture them instead. You could have killed us during our first encounter, but you chose communication. You're showing that intelligence can override instinct when necessary. The Elder's patterns shifted through several rapid sequences before settling into something that registered as thoughtful consideration. You suggest that demonstrating our civilization will earn respect rather than fear. I suggest that the Council needs to see you as partners rather than threats, and the best way to do that is to show them that you think strategically rather than just tactically. Elaborate. Marcus gestured toward the displays showing the captured ship's artifacts. Release the prisoners, all of them immediately without conditions. Vextai's mandibles clicked in shock. Marcus, you can't just... Let me finish. Commander. His voice carried an authority that made her hesitate. Release the prisoners and offer to escort their ships safely out of your territory. Then send a formal diplomatic message to the Council through us, requesting negotiations for territorial recognition. And if the Council refuses? Thassalan asked. Then you'll have demonstrated good faith while maintaining your military advantage. Any future actions you take will be seen as defensive, rather than aggressive. The Elder was quiet for a long moment, its patterns cycling through complex sequences that clearly indicated deep thought. Finally, it addressed Marcus directly. You think like a hunter-killer, but you counsel like a... What is your word? Peacemaker. This is unusual. Sometimes the best way to avoid a war is to demonstrate that you're capable of winning one. Yes, the Elder agreed, its patterns brightening with what might have been approval. We understand this philosophy. Very well, hunter-killer. We will release your people and attempt this diplomacy. But know this, if your council chooses aggression over negotiation, we will respond accordingly. Understood, Marcus replied. But I don't think it will come to that. You have great confidence in your government's wisdom. I have great confidence in their sense of self-preservation, Marcus corrected. Once they understand what you're capable of, they'll want you as allies rather than enemies. As the meeting concluded and arrangements were made for the prisoner's release, Vextai found herself studying her human crew member with new eyes. His understanding of both alien psychology and political strategy far exceeded anything she'd expected from a simple tracker. Marcus, she said quietly, as they were escorted back toward the docking bay. What exactly were you before you joined the Council? He looked at her with eyes that seemed far older than his apparent age. Someone who tracked things that didn't want to be found, he said simply. And sometimes, someone who made sure they were never found again. The implications of this statement would stay with Vextai long after they'd left Kethvar space. But for now, she had a crew to recover and a first contact situation to manage. Thanks to her unlikely human tracker, it looked like both tasks might actually be possible. As the Kaleidoscope prepared to depart with the released prisoners and a formal diplomatic message from the Kethvar, Vessel Keeper Thassalan sent one final communication to their ship. It was addressed specifically to Marcus. Hunter recognizes Hunter, the message read. Should you ever tire of herding prey species, there is place for you among true predators. Marcus deleted the message without sharing it with the crew. Some invitations were better left unanswered. But as they jumped to hyperspace, carrying news that would reshape the Council's understanding of territorial rights and interspecies relations, he couldn't help but smile at the Elder's parting words. The Kethvar had understood him perfectly. He just hoped the Council never would.